Please welcome to the stage Alan Rikman. Good evening.
Hello.
As the title would suggest, this evening is about your film career, mainly. Were there films, or was there a film, particularly when you were growing up, that you particularly liked and kind of inspired you, and you thought, well, yeah, I could get into that kind of world?
You have to remember what kind of films were knocking around when I was a child. When I was I remember the school cinema club was full of things like the Titfield Thunderbolt, and then things changed a lot when I went to art school. And suddenly you discover there's this person called Antonioni who can make a film where there's a scene with a piece of paper blowing down the street, or Fellini, and then you start to wake up a bit, and things change. I don't know that I thought this would be part of my life. To be perfectly honest, having a film career at all is a bit of a surprise.
You kind of started out with graphic design and typography and all of that, didn't you? That was your first professional. So how did the move into acting come about?
I went to a school that had a very strong drama tradition, and so there was a lot of theatre going on, and I still acted while I was at art school. You can see how the dots join up a bit, and you see that the art school part of me gets put together with the drama school part of me and the theatre part of me, and then somewhere in there you find that there's this desire and this sort of somewhat trained desire to direct.
You acted on the stage, you got into television, then Les Liaisons Dangereuses became a huge hit in the West End on Broadway on stage. Was that the key to getting you the role in Die Hard, your first film?
Totally. I figured, or somebody told me, you've got about 2 weeks of people's attention. We'd finished 6 months in New York, and so I went to LA and did the round of meetings, and I didn't know how any of this happened. I didn't know anything about LA. I didn't really know anything about the film business. I went to meet some casting directors. I went to meet some producers, and I think it was 2 days after I got there, I was offered Die Hard, and never made a film before, but I was extremely cheap.
That's the kind of film now that we routinely refer to as a blockbuster. It's a genre film that we know and recognise instantly. Did you know what you're getting yourself into when you took that role?
I read it and I said, what the hell is this? I'm not doing an action movie. And agents and people said, Alan, you don't understand, this doesn't happen. You've only been in LA 2 days and you've been asked to do this film. Okay, but I suppose ignorance was bliss in a way. It reminds me of the discussions that went on, which must have been out of me being stupid, because I was being fitted for all this terrorist gear in the early days of the putting of the film together, and I said, why would I be wearing this when I've got all these huge hulks who are going to do all the dirty work? So I was just thinking, if I was wearing a suit and not all of this terrorist gear, then maybe there could be a scene where I put on an American accent and he thinks I'm one of the hostages. And I left this note on Joel Silver's table saying, please think about this, I think it might be interesting. And then I went back to England, and I kind of got the Joel Silver, get the hell out of here, you'll wear what you're told. Okay, fine. And then I came back and they handed me the new script. So, it just pays to occasionally use a little bit of theatre training when you're doing a movie. What did he have for breakfast? Where did he come from? I'm going to look ridiculous in those costumes.
I mean, there is a lot of action involved. You get involved in a lot of the action. Was that something that came to you easily?
If you look carefully at any of the scenes with the guns, you'll see me blinking. I think they may have had to cut those out. You can't stop yourself. It's a bit shocking how thrilling it is to shoot a machine gun. That I discovered.
I bet.
And then I remember towards the end of the shooting, they said, we have this shot. They came to me sort of not looking me quite in the eyes. They've got this shot at the end. We want to, you've got to fall from at the top of the building, and we could use the stand-in, but of course if we'd use the stand-in, we'd have to put it on the back of his head going down that way. I thought about it. I said, I'll do it. Because this is before the days of CGI. Now anybody do it, because you'd just be falling nowhere, and they'd blow your clothes in a computer. That had to be done for real. So I said, so how do we do this? And they said, okay, well, we'll train you. Which meant one afternoon, I think, of dropping from 10 feet, 15 feet, 20 feet, 30 feet, and so on. And I remember the guy who was doing it saying, okay, what you've got to remember is I had to pull my own cord to release me. I had to remember to bring the gun up and get it in the frame. And then he said, as you're going down, make sure you spread your arms into a kind of star shape, because if you don't, you'll start turning and you'll land on your head and kill yourself. So it was sort of challenging. And we did it 3 times at 3 o'clock in the morning, and it was the very last shot of mine in the film.
Wow.
Just in case.
Well, let's move on to Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves as well, another hugely successful film.
Here's a true story. I had a habit of going and having lunch with a very great writer, playwright, now dead, sadly, called Peter Barnes. And I knew I was going to do Robin Hood, and I said, will you have a look at this script, because it's terrible. And I need some good lines. He said, well, here where it says you're coming down the corridor and you're wiping the scar off of the statue, you should have a wench in a doorway, and then you should say, you, my room, 10:30, and then turn to the other wench and say, you, 10:45. So I'm going, you, my room, 10:45. I'd also given the script to Ruby Wax, who's a great friend of mine, and I said to her, will you read this script and come up with some lines? And she came around to my house. I said, you read the script? No, I didn't have time. Just say the lines to me. So I said, well, today Peter Barnes said, you have a wench there, you, my room, 10:30, you, 10:45. Immediately she said, and bring a friend. And bring a friend. And when I presented this to Kevin Reynolds, he'd learnt by then not to tell the producers, for whatever reason, and not tell the crew or anything. And so he set this up for me to do it, and I said, look, I'll say these lines, you put the women there, I'll say the lines, and then I'll just clear the frame at the end of the line. And nobody knew this was happening except him. And I knew it had worked because as I cleared the camera, I saw about 80 members of the crew just go... And then occasionally, Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio, who was being sort of seriously made Marion, she'd come over to do one of the scenes with us, and she'd say, I want to be in his film.
You could have done an endless series of huge, big Hollywood films, but did you get scripts that you didn't like and turn them down, or did you just want to do other stuff and that whatever came along appealed to you and you would do other kinds of films?
Well, theatre was also always in there, so I think somewhere around that time I was also rehearsing Hamlet, and I like the risk factor in work. I like feeling a bit unsafe, and theatre, of course, is deadly.
And did Truly, Madly, Deeply feel like a kind of gamble, a risk?
No, that was, I suppose, what comes around goes around in a way. Juliet Stevenson and I had done a lot of work in the theatre together. I think so much so that she was a bit nervous about me playing the part, I found out later. But I know him too well. He's like my brother. But Anthony, it was his first film. and you know, now you learn all sorts of stuff that you realize you've stolen down the line, like Anthony's vulnerability on the set, the fact that he gathered the crew and actors together on day one and just said, I have one word, help. The fact that he put huge value because of his theatre writing on rehearsal. So we had 2 weeks of rehearsals to achieve whatever we achieved in that. And the fact that Juliet and I trust each other so much is, I think, gold dust when you're doing that sort of work.
When you read that script and when you make that kind of film, do you know how special it's going to be, or does that all happen afterwards?
It's a sort of litmus test because, you know, you say everybody fell in love with that film. I wouldn't say the critics did.
Oh, really? Okay.
And I wouldn't say, I think it was even on Room 101 once. And I think it went down.
I read an interview recently in Empire where they asked you whether any particular roles were close to you, your personality. And Sense and Sensibility came up, this character who's kind of very dignified and calm.
I think that was the reason.
That's one of the reasons.
Yes, I'm so dignified. No.
Emma Thompson's script and Ang Lee directing. Now that seems like what a magical combination that's going to be. But back then, Ang Lee didn't speak very good English, did he, particularly? So how was it working with him?
Well, then a lot of people thought he's going to direct Jane Austen, but I'd seen Eat, Drink, Man, Woman, and you just thought, well, this is an inspired choice, really, because he's visually so wonderful. Added to which, Emma had written an absolutely wonderful script out of her genius and love of Jane Austen. You had to, you kind of had to interpret what Ang was saying quite a lot of the time. And he'd have his own way of getting upset about something or think about something. He'd go and disappear off in the middle of a field with a little cardboard box and a big pile of pink buns. Just sort of sit there during lunch thinking. And then you had to translate. Emma's put it in her book where things that he said to us, like, my one was, Alan, be more subtle, do more. So then you knew it was do more of the subtle acting. Yeah. And Kate had, never mind, you'll get better. So it got to the point quite quickly, and of course the other thing is, of course, on that film there was a lot of laughter. She's not unfunny, Miss Thompson.
And working with Kate Winslet on that film, of course, is in your new film, which we'll get to later. But she's recently said, I think this came up at the premiere the other day, where she said she was scared of you. Did you know about that?
I'd have to have words with her. I mean, really.
Okay. I was going to ask about the different directors you work with. Have you learnt different things from all of those directors, or kind of did you have your own vision?
I think if you're smart, you learn from all of them, and what it's kind of in what I've been saying. If you talk about Neil Jordan, and then you say Ang Lee, and then you say Alfonso Cuarón and Anthony Minghella, it's not like a generic title. These are very, very, very different human beings with very different energies and opinions and relationships with actors and rhythms, and you learn from the people where you watch them and thinking, well, I wouldn't handle it like that. So you learn from that as much as going, well, I'm stealing that. That's the joy of filmmaking.
I think one of the funniest kind of Hollywood comedies, Galaxy Quest. Did you know when you read that script? Did you know immediately this was something special?
All the actors did. The brilliant thing that Dean Pariseau did on that film was, apart from Tim Allen, and I guess appropriately apart from Tim Allen, everybody else grew up in the theatre. So he was like an alien to us. He'd kick down the door of the makeup trailer in the morning and he'd yell, "Number one is here," and all the rest of us are looking at our script. So it was a perfect marriage of acting energies, I suppose, and it meant that those of us playing the actors, we became like this tight little group against the pressures of producers coming out of the gloom first of the morning going, they're still talking, when are we going to start shooting? And we were able to turn around and say, look, just give us 20 minutes and we will have sorted out the whole day because we'll know what we're supposed to be doing as a group of actors.
Right.
Yeah.
And we should mention 8 films in 10 years where you played the same role in the Harry Potter films. Did you know at the start what direction that character was going? Did J.K. Rowling tell you?
People think I knew a lot, and I didn't. When I was asked to do it, there were only 3 books written, I think. And so, by and large, I was learning with the readers. Every time there was a new book, basically, I was just going, oh, I'm still in it. Right? But when I was asked to do it, and I'd read the first book, and I said, look, I really need to talk to her. I can't play this. I don't know where this character's going. And so they put me in touch with her and over the phone, and she was with her sister that day, and she said, I can't talk now, I'm with my sister, I'll talk to you tomorrow. So that's how much Jo Rowling kept it to herself. And then she gave me it wasn't even a fact, she just gave me one piece of information, and I promised her I would never share it, and I never will, and not that it's anything people don't know now, but she gave me one piece of information which made me know that whatever happened, I had to try to drive down 2 roads at the same time until all the facts emerged. So I knew there was ambiguity.
Right. Did it feel like a kind of mad situation for you involved, or did you just let it all... It
was a very changing thing, of course, as it would be over 10 years. Apart from anything else, 3 leading actors start out at 12 years old and then they're 22. Meanwhile, CGI is growing up along with you. So at the beginning of it all, we used to go off on location. Forget that by the end of it. You know, we were in a pile of old grass around at the back of Leavesden Studios with a big football stadium and lights. And I will never forget, on the last film at 3 o'clock in the morning, Michael Gambon staggering up this piece of old grass and looking at me and saying, am I dead in this scene? And in the first film, if anybody ever wants to look, of course, you know, you've got the problem of kids who can only work in a certain number of hours. So if there were any scenes with, say, me and Daniel, Rupert, and Emma, of course they'd shoot when it was on them, it would be on their faces and I'd be there. But when we turned round, in would come the very small actors, aged 33, with a wig on their head. So that ain't the back of Daniel's head in those shots, so that we could keep working.
Let's move on to another maverick director, Tim Burton. Sweeney Todd. Was performing a duet with Johnny Depp as much fun as it looks?
He's great to act with, he really is. He's very, very generous and shares himself on the set and really listens and doesn't play rank or anything. He's terrific to work with. Of course, what you've got to remember is that we're both lip syncing, we're miming for 2 days. And we recorded it separately. So I didn't hear it put together until we got on the set.
And Tim Burton, what was it like? He seems a very incredibly visual director. He let the blood flow freely in that film.
Yeah, but you know, he's a real example of don't typecast people, because I think people see all that hair and his drawings and his wild imagination, and you think it's going to be like this kind of human pogo stick on the set or something. And of course, he's not like that at all. And going back to your other question, I used to watch him and he'd be in between takes, he'd just pace up and down, and you knew he wasn't talking to anybody, but you knew he was just locked inside his own pictures that he was putting together, or here's how he was going to stitch it together story-wise. And I really admired things he asked for, like on the set, it was an interior but exterior set of Fleet Street. He said, I want the camera to be able to shoot this through 360 degrees. So this was a piece of scene painting and set construction like you really won't see anymore. And I work a lot at RADA still, and I brought all the technical students onto the set. I said, you have got to go and look at that piece of scene painting there with that, like from here over to that wall, you think you're looking at a shop awning, 3 dimensions. It was painted, and there were only like a couple of little mirrors on the set to fill in the gaps, but the rest of it totally surrounded us.
Well, let's move on to your second film as director, A Little Chaos. Why was this the script, the idea that drew you to directing?
It's that weird circumstance where the letterbox clatters and 180 pages of a script dropped through. Alison Deegan, and it was her first script. And I loved the fact that she knew her subject, Louis XIV and the building of Versailles. The central character is a woman that couldn't possibly have existed, a woman landscape gardener, or a woman with a job at all. So it's a male-dominated world with a lot of women who are merely decorative objects. Weirdly, that has modern parallels still. So I like that about it.
It's a very obvious question, but I have to ask it. Directing yourself, how many takes of yourself did you demand?
Rafe Fiennes is a good friend, and he directed The Invisible Woman, a year or so ago, and boy, is he in that a lot more than I'm in this. I show up occasionally in this, and I have no idea how he did that. Or Russell Crowe is just directed, and he's probably in every shot of that, and Ryan Gosling, and so there's a lot of it about. No, it's not easy. It's not even, I think, for me, desirable. But the good thing about playing Louis XIV is he doesn't move very much. So you don't have to do blocking for him, because people come to him. One of my great beliefs is not to think about what you're saying, think about what you're hearing, so that what you say is automatic. Then you've got a chance of something happening between you, because you're not focusing on yourself, you're focusing on the other person. Then there might be a story. And Kate is one of the greatest listeners you'll ever sit in an editing room thanking God for, when you want to watch a character learn about herself, which is what she has to do in this film, figure out who she is.
I could see her listening all night to our guest, but just leaves me to thank Alan Rickman.
Thank you.